So who are you?
And yeah, this is a bit of a refresh in that I am, I know what I am underneath it all, but what I'm experiencing in the moment is basically who I am today or this evening.
Hmm.
Right now, this evening, really struggling with the idea of going back to work.
Wow.
Which in an overall sense means that I'm struggling with this idea of attachment, this idea of how to make things that you need to do into things that you want to do, to find that layer of the experience because the nature of my job here in just a few days, I disappear. It is not unusual for me to work. I leave here at 5 to 7 in the morning, and
Mm.
it's not unusual for me to work until 11 or 12 p.m. 11 or p.m. or 12 a.m. 5 days a week.
Wow.
And it's not unusual for me to work at least one day of my weekend. So it can be uh, very trying, and I try and maintain my physical fitness and
Hmm.
some kind of meditative practice and keep reading good books and enjoying somewhat of my life in between there. And that's a dance. That's a real dance to do. And so I'm preparing for the dance is where I'm at right now and trying not to clench up and trying not to resent that I'm about to lose all of this freedom and time I've been enjoying for the last few weeks.
So I was actually going to say that it sounds like it is very consuming of you. So
Yeah.
there we are trying to get to who you are, and we are encountering an experience that you're walking into going back to work after vacation, where you
Yeah.
will be consumed. So, what is that part of you that is being consumed?
Um, well, it's the freedom to choose largely. I'm a very independent individual. I've been self-employed for most of my adult life. I've gone in and out of working in-house again and again, but primarily I've been self-employed since I was 24.
Mm.
It's been a while. So I view myself as self-employed. So one of the hardest things of going back to becoming a professor, which is what I do now, was, going back on a schedule and on somebody else's dime and at somebody else's discretion. But once again, those are all constructs. What I'm trying to do, and what I am working on this weekend coming into it, is remembering that, who I actually am is the teacher. Who I actually am is the person who interacts with students. In my case, I'm teaching them technical skill, but that's not the important part. The important part is teaching them how to learn, teaching them how to be curious, teaching them how to observe. One of the things that I love about what I do is that I honestly believe that the amount of importance a job has is how much you impact others. That's where meaning comes from. And for many years as a visual artist, both in illustration and graphics, and then as a jewelry person, I was into making beauty. That's what I do. I make things pretty, Gaytri, or I make things sell. Right? I sell a story with an illustration or a product or blah. Right?
So, I was going to bring this back to the choices you make
Hmm.
because you talked about going back after vacation, losing freedom, and you were self employed, which entailed a lot of choice on your part.
Hmm.
But you're choosing to go back to work.
Yes.
You're actually exercising your freedom.
Yeah. Yeah. That is an important mindset to have. I can't afford not to go back to work because I once I became a full-time academic, the realities of being a full-time designer, that's a whole client list and life that you have to build. And I did build for 30 years. So when I went to being an academic, well, I've kept hold of that life in little pieces, but not enough to support me. So in reality, I do have to go back.
Mm,
But it is not beneficial to think of it that way. And I do miss the students, and I do like that sharing of energy. I do believe that as far as who I am, I think that is largely why I'm here. I believe that my ability to influence people, whether that's to inspire or instruct, or direct, that's actually what I'm best at. Uh, my ability to color,
hmm
to make pretty things, uh, that's a that's something I was born with and I developed and I honed, but it's not who I am. It's
Right.
one of the things that makes me valuable. And it is important to have something that makes you valuable. And what I do, I'm one of the best. Um,
And can you not actually talk about it in the sense of projecting who you are by making certain contributions to those around you, including through teaching, um, that really impact or influence by sharing who you are? Right. I think
yeah,
that's what you might be trying to do.
exactly. Yeah, it is sharing who I am. And also, I think it's interesting in that I work with people from all over the world, of course, but many of my students, none of my students are where I'm from, right?
That's really
And
interesting.
I'm from the most conservative state in the country. I'm from Utah. We make Texas look like it's on the fringe of radical liberalism. So I come from the most conservative state in this country. I'm not a conservative myself, but that is where I come from. I sound like I sound because of where I'm from. I'm a white elderly gentleman, as it were. Whereas I teach, the people I teach are mostly women.
Hmm
80, 90% of my students are female.
Wow,
And
that's
they
interesting.
are, yeah, and they're from all over the world. 30% of our enrollment is international. And the
Right.
ones that aren't international are usually from New York. So they're
hmm
from the East. And so engaging me in a classroom actually shows them that we have more in common than we don't have in common.
hmm
So even though I am something that, if they were to meet me outside of that venue, might be a person that they would not necessarily engage. Being in that environment where we do interact very closely, I think really helps to remove the illusion of these boundaries,
hmm
uh, that separate people. Because at the core, we're all more alike than not. So, and that's part of what I teach by just being in the room with them.
Right. So the second question of this conversation goes to how much of who you are was cultivated by family, friends, colleagues, mentors, teachers, humans, your human community. And maybe you can talk a little bit about changes, difficulties, or challenges that were, um, I guess, your place or space in the world was improved by other humans around you.
Yeah, improved and challenged both. I'll try and condense because there's a lot of years there. Um, as a small person, I was bullied a great deal. Particularly, I would say from the ages of like 9 until 13, 14. And
You're not
because
small now. I mean,
no, no, but when I was a young person, I was bullied severely. And that came to an end. And I mentioned this to you before that I changed high schools. High school boundaries changed. I went to a new place. Nobody knew me. And so instead of being a pariah, I actually became popular. And this interaction with people pointed out to me how unfair
Mhm.
all of that previous treatment had been. And it was difficult to adjust to. There was some anger involved.
Mhm.
Most of it was good. I'd much rather be popular than be a pariah.
Mhm.
Um, and it fed my ego, and I made friends. I sometimes abused that popularity. Having been treated unkindly, I could be unkind to others. It took some maturity to get past that. Which I would, as an adult, I look back, it helps me understand the bullies better, but at the time it
Mhm.
didn't have that effect. But the next thing that happened after that is really important. I went on an LDS mission, which is what people from where I'm from do when they're 19.
What does
So
LDS stand for?
the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints,
Okay.
Mormons.
Yeah,
I was a
Mormon.
Mormon missionary. In that culture, we're all raised to go do that. And as a very upstanding young man who'd become very devout in the faith and popular, you know, apple of mom and dad's eye, as it were, I went on a mission to the UK, to Great Britain. However, right before I left, I fell in love for the first time, a real serious love relationship with a young woman, which we're not supposed to do, but I did. And the understanding was that she would wait for me. I would go away for 2 years. I would come back. We'd be together. All would be well. I didn't handle it well, going overseas. I was
Mhm.
not mature enough. That's a fact. But also, um, they didn't prepare me very well for what I engaged. Well, I was in abject poverty over there, because of the structure of how missions work in the
Mhm.
Mormon faith. Your parents pay, so the common denominator is poverty. And I was in pretty bad circumstances economically because the UK is an expensive place to live. I wasn't
Mhm.
used to that. I came from suburban Utah. You could eat off the bathroom floor at the home I grew up in. My mother was clean and everything was, you know, just so. And so
Right.
moving over there was a different experience. Where you're paired with a companion as a missionary, and the gentleman I was with was caustic and hostile and not nice. He didn't want to be paired with a newbie, a greenie like me. So
Mhm.
that was frictious, and I was missing my girl. Boy, I was just having a terrible time. And to
Mhm.
make a long story short, it wasn't that long, but a long story short, I ended up having an emotional nervous breakdown and needing to come home. I tried to come home, they wouldn't let me, and eventually, them not allowing me to come home put me into crisis mode that I ended up having a breakdown, and I came home anyway.
Mhm.
The outcome of that is what was important.
What's
The
that?
mission experience itself was great because I got to see a whole other world, right? I saw the UK, which has nothing to do with Utah, right? So that was expanding in a way. But when I came home, I was disowned. Um, and
Oh my God.
there's nothing you can do in the culture I grew up in that is basically worse than what I did. Particularly then, it was a much more, I believe, a much more extreme environment than we're facing now in that culture. But back then, you just didn't do what I did, and if you did, your life did not go well. So my parents didn't really speak to me much for almost 2 years. I wasn't able to date. I was a I was a popular little thing in high school, and when I came back from England, if I tried to date anybody, as soon as they discovered my crime, I had glasses of water thrown in my face and people walk out.
Because you
The
had a
group,
health issue that meant you had to return.
just the fact that I returned, they didn't care why I returned. I had returned. And you can tell because in the Mormon church, you wear garments, you wear religious underclothing that
I
you can
see.
see through regular clothing. And they call them the tape lines on your arms and thighs. And I didn't have them, and yet I was at the age where I was supposed to have them. So that always begged the question is, why don't you have them?
Mhm.
And I would always tell them because I came home, right? So
Mhm.
the girl I came home for was
Yeah. What happened?
actually, she was in love with somebody else. Yeah,
No.
yeah,
Oh my God.
yeah. So I came home to nothing.
You had no letters during that time?
Well, you do, but the mail. This is circa 1981. Mail slowed going to the UK,
Mm.
and of course she didn't tell me that in any of the letters. I came home to find out. So because she wasn't expecting me to come home. Yeah. So, um, so my whole world was turned upside down, and the reason this is important is because Gaytri, I became a pariah again.
Well, again, how did you overcome that?
Yeah, and so that was the interesting thing because I had gotten past the first time when I was a pariah because I realized that that was unfair. It was children being mean and blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. But now I had done something criminal in my culture. I
Wow.
had done something unforgivable in my culture. And the reward for that was to become a pariah. And
It's kind of a
I mean, I lost,
banishment of
yeah, I
sorts.
lost my friends. I lost, with very few exceptions, I lost everything. And that was a very defining thing for me.
Hmm.
Because it threw me terribly. I had a hard time working. I had a deep depression, closest I've ever came to hurting myself. Finally got myself back together again. Eventually got to go back into college and try and pull myself back together. But to do that, and this is the important thing,
Hmm.
to do that, I had to do two things. I first off, I had to become an atheist. Um, that was important because I had done this horrible spiritual crime. Because there
Hmm.
were people in England who could only come to the gospel of Jesus Christ through me, and since I'd come home early, I had condemned them, right?
Hmm.
So I had a huge amount of guilt, and I had a huge amount of failure on me, and the only way to breathe was for a time to simply become completely a-religious, to come to just let go of all sense of spirituality.
So I have a
Which is,
quick question there.
yeah,
Was that guilt foisted on you by the human community around you, or was it actually felt
it was
because you
felt.
were, yeah, because you were
It
of
was
that
felt
faith?
because this way of thinking was hard coded into me since I was, I grew
Yeah,
up in it.
right.
So you can't escape where you're from, no matter how hard you try. So the guilt was internal, but it was certainly being reinforced by the community around me. Nobody wanted to see me succeed. In fact, if I were to succeed, it would have proven bad things. I needed to be a cautionary tale. I needed to be a
Hmm.
public cautionary tale of your life gets ruined if this is something you choose to do. So there was no effort from anybody surrounding me to try and help or support, really. That's not entirely true.
Would
My
you
sister was
say
amazing.
that your downfall in that moment was existential for that community to
Yes,
survive?
yes,
Because it was either them or you?
yeah. Oh, yes. That theme kind of continues in a way.
Hmm.
But the other thing that happened, aside from having to move away from religion, was that I had to discover that I had to love me for me,
Hmm.
that I could no longer depend on what other people thought of me to support my version of me. And that's really hard, Gayatri, because we're all brought up in a fishbowl with everybody watching us with all kinds of, repercussions for not doing what we're told or what we're supposed to do or what's expected of us. And since I had done something unforgivable and unrecoverable, um, I had to learn to love me without anybody else's support for that. And that was very powerful.
Hmm.
That was very, very important. It's also when I started actually challenging my religious beliefs intellectually. But that took a while because like I said, for about 2 years, I completely left everything spiritual alone. I came back to it. I'm a deeply spiritual person, and that didn't last. But it was something I had to do for a brief time just to breathe because I was at a point where it was kind of either breathe or don't breathe. And so that was a huge defining moment, and it set me on a course of independence that really formed the rest of my life. Independent intellectually, independent religiously and spiritually. It
Hmm.
was during this process where I, learned to trust my own counsel above anybody else's, because I everybody else's counsel said I was awful, so that was
Hmm.
me or them. It's also part of that period is when I got introduced to meditation and through a very gifted yoga meditation instructor who introduced me not only to meditative practices, to consciousness technology, but also to like spiritual hygiene and to understanding who I am and coming to peace with things. One of the most beautiful things he ever said to me once is because I was still struggling, and by this time I'm 23, 24. He said to me, he said, "You ever notice?" Because I had we kept talking about it. We have apricot trees around my home and stuff. He
Mm.
said, "You ever notice how when an apricot gets ripe, it falls?
Mm.
It doesn't mean the tree's a bad tree. It doesn't mean the apricot doesn't love the tree.
Mhm.
It doesn't mean the apricot's trying to get away from the tree. It simply means the apricot is done with the tree and it drops." And he said, "That's what has happened to you. There's not anything wrong inherently with the way you were raised or the faith you came up in, but it wasn't my path anymore."
So would you say that overcoming that critical or that crisis moment was based in this search for self, getting back to the original you, so to speak?
Yes. In fact, one of the things that I kept coming up in my head was trying to get back to the child before the bullying,
Hmm.
uh, get back to the really sensitive little guy, because I always was, um, who I was as a small child, to try and rediscover that
Hmm.
quality within myself. Who was there before? Who was underlying all of it? Both being a pariah from being a bully, both under becoming popular and accepted, both also underlying becoming a pariah again, and underlying the recovery from that and the reinvention of myself, which
Hmm.
also took place because I moved across the country, to Boston and then New York, which you can't get more different than the Salt Lake Valley of Utah than those places.
Hmm.
And that exposed me to a whole different way of seeing the world. As I said once to a member of my family, I said, "I've always thought that I lived in a middle class, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant country. And I didn't know that I didn't until I moved to the East Coast." Um, and so that exposure to things that were completely different from me. But all of that was just by then I'd already learned to just look to myself. Satchidananda, who was the closest thing I've ever had to a guru, Sri Swami Satchidananda, he said that you should beware of received knowledge, that most of the knowledge you get in life is received. Somebody else has told you, or you've read it, or you've, gotten it from a class or a teacher, He said, be wary of all of that. You shouldn't avoid it because there's
Hmm.
wonderful things there. But you should first and foremost depend on what you observe yourself.
Right. So
Yeah.
that little boy that you rediscovered, who was he? How was he? I mean, he sounds very social actually because he's sensitive to social cues from others.
Yeah, he's a watcher. My parents actually there's actually some question as an adult if I might have been on the spectrum. I don't know. But my parents, they took me to the doctor when I was 2 because I hadn't spoken yet. I wasn't talking.
Mhm.
And they took me to the doctor, and the doctor came out and he said, "Oh, he can talk. He just doesn't have anything to say." Um, I was a very quiet child. I liked to watch. I liked to listen. I didn't necessarily want to engage. I just wanted to watch and listen and enjoy the people around me.
Mhm.
I was also shy, but that's hard to see how natural that was because bullying will turn you into that. I
Right.
am still shy, Gayatri. Uh, the persona that's necessary for my professional life, both as a self-employed artisan craftsman, but also as a professor,
Mhm.
that's a construct. I
Right.
developed that persona.
Yeah, but the little boy who was waiting 2 years was obviously very curious because it was sufficient for him to observe
Yes.
and discover his world,
Yeah.
which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So, our last question, as you know, is where has technology played a role in either harmful or helpful in overcoming challenges or simply in getting to know your world?
Um, Once again, I'm going to touch a bit on what we had talked about before, and that is that, of course, I grew up in television era. I didn't grow up in the digital era.
Mhm.
Nobody owned computers in the 1980s. The first computer in my neighborhood was owned by the Becks, and they were the house behind the house across the street. And I was friends with one of their kids, and they had an early Apple. And I went in there all excited, and all you could do was use it for a word processor, which I thought was a complete waste of time because we had typewriters. Who needs that?
Mm.
So they were that rare, right? But TV exposed me to the outside world. The culture I grew up in was very closed off. Everybody thought the same. Everybody agreed about what reality was. Everybody looked the same. Heck, we're all related. I mean, the Mormon missionaries were very effective in Scandinavia and the British Isles in the late 1800s, the 1870s, 1860s. And those are the folks who immigrated to Utah. So we're all Gaelic Scandinavians, the whole blasted state.
Mhm.
And then you had the polygamy thing. Okay. So I always used to joke with my friends. Lived in Louisiana briefly. I'd say, hey, you think your genetics are tight. Where I come from, they're real tight. So it was kind of a closed society.
Mhm.
And it liked it that way. It really did. The Mormons called themselves a peculiar people, and they take great pride in that.
Mhm.
But television brought in the outside world. I saw people of different races for the first time in my life. The only ethnic people that we had in Utah, we had Native Americans who'd come off the reservation and attend school with us, but not very many. My first friend, my first real friend, as a young adult, was my buddy Jesse, and I met him between ninth and 10th grade, and he was from Mexico, and he was the only Mexican kid in our high school,
Was he
the only
tanned?
one. Huh?
Was he tanned? His
A
skin?
little bit. He's just
Yeah.
beautiful. Jess is 6'2", thick hair, golden complexion. His mother's French.
Oh.
So all the girls love Jess. It was good to be Jess's friend. I always looked a little short and dumpy, but you know, uh, but he did face racism, tremendous
Mhm.
racism. Uh, the neighbors got together and did an auction war and tried to buy the house his father tried to move into to keep Mexicans out of the neighborhood.
Wow.
Unfortunately for them, his father was a very wealthy man, and he outbid them and
Mhm.
and bought the place and flew the Mexican flag off the front porch for a week. Um, but that didn't make it any easier for my buddy. You know,
Right.
it was rough. But TV, getting back to technology, TV. I saw black people for the first time on TV. I got sensitized to ideas of racism on TV. I got sensitized to the racism accompanying the Vietnam War because that was on TV.
Mhm.
So for good and bad, I was expanded through TV and connected to a world beyond my borders. The computer itself really took over As an illustrator, which was my first artistic career, I refused to use it. I was completely traditional media, oil paint on paper. I wouldn't use a
Mhm.
computer. And that eventually made me extinct. And that stubbornness was that led to the downfall of my professional success. And I changed careers into jewelry specifically to get away from the computer. But the second time around, the computer came again anyway. And so that time I bought a computer on loan, the worst way you can buy it because it's obsolete by the time you pay it off. And bought all the wrong software because at that point nobody in the jewelry industry was using it, so they didn't know what the right software was. And I taught myself. And it's ironic because I'm often used as a digital consultant in my industry. So I'm very computer literate now.
Right.
I do CAD modeling. I teach CAD modeling. Of course, I work in graphic software all the time.
Hmm.
And of course, I'm fluent in all the varieties of social media and that sort of thing. So
Well,
yeah,
as your
it
world
changed.
expanded, maybe from TV as well, and then computer technology in your professional life, um, as that happened, did you also see changes in your community? I know you were talking about uh, the TV, what was the TV program Roots?
Yeah, yeah. That created a lot of discussion in my family as a kid because it was so well done that you couldn't help but feel horrible about the conditions and legacy of slavery. But at the same time, you know, my parents were both from agricultural towns
Hmm.
in Utah, and the idea that you should apologize or feel apologetic for the color of your skin was a very difficult idea for them
Hmm.
because that's what the program makes you feel bad, and they didn't want to feel bad, right? So these conversations were part of the home. It took place around the dinner table. There were no conclusions made. I love my parents. My parents always told me that we were free. I was free to say no to anything. They could ask me to do anything, and I was free to say no. They said, but if you do, you better have a really good argument. And we'd debate. They
Hmm.
were they for where and when they were from. They were tremendously open and generous people that way. So they were frank conversations, and there are conversations that still go on in this country today. Um,
Hmm.
Um, but so yeah, now technology today, I would say that since media has blown wide open now, people pick their media. So
Hmm.
my people back home, they're all very conservative. Not all of them. I have some family members who'd resent that. Many of my family members are deeply conservative
Hmm.
and very politically deeply conservative. And they don't consume the same media I do. It's no
Right.
longer the land of three television channels where we're all consuming the same media because that's all there is. You can now select your media, and media actually pushes it on you, your selections. So you're being coerced into selecting media that just feeds into the same echo chamber. So I would say that now media, if anything, is siloing people.
Hmm.
It is actually reducing the interactions between people. And I think that is tragic. I going back to the whole post England thing.
Hmm.
The way that I broke out of this with my parents is one day I told them, I said, I need to talk to you. And they said, yeah. And we sat down and I said, I need you to yell at me. And they said, what do you mean? We're not going to yell at you. I said, please yell at me. I know I've disappointed you. I know I have hurt you. I know I've embarrassed you in front of everybody that's important to you. I've humiliated you. Yell at me because I'd rather have a bad relationship with you than no relationship with you.
Hmm.
So they did. They laid into me. It was wonderful, hurtful, but wonderful. And we were able to move past it, right? Now, with the way things are siloed, people can avoid interacting with people who may not agree with them. And
That's what
that's
I was noticing. You know, you've had this amazing journey of self-discovery, but you've come so far from where you're from, from that origin, and you've changed so much, actually. You know, we talk about political parties, but it's a whole worldview in you
yeah,
that has, in fact, been transformed. And yet you're so accepting, it sounds to me, of other
yeah.
people, including your family, including your community.
Of course, of course.
Yeah.
Because I used to think that way. One of the joys of having traveled a long ways, you can call it up, call it down, take your pick. But having traveled a long ways in your life is that you've been a lot of different people. You've
Hmm.
worn a lot of hats. And it's really hard to judge or dislike somebody that you used to agree with. You have to be able to see and understand the idea that because somebody doesn't agree with you politically or religiously or for whatever reason means they're stupid. If you believe that, then your intelligence is limited. You can find brilliant people who disagree with you 100%, no matter what it is you think,
Hmm.
no matter where it is you stand. You can find somebody absolutely brilliant who'll disagree with you.
Right.
This idea that there's an absolutely correct way to think and behave is a fallacy. It's not there. But I would say, as we're talking about authentic self, that that is who I always was. When I was a young kid, the Jehovah's Witnesses used to come and knock on our door, which I always thought was brave. J-Dubs tracting in a Mormon community. But they did, bless their hearts. And I'd always take the literature and I'd read it. My mom would find it and she would get really upset and she'd burn it because it had the devil in it. She'd burn it in the fireplace. And when they came back around again, because they would, I'd get the literature again because I just couldn't understand why something could be that scary. They seemed like nice people to me, right?
Hmm.
So I've never been able to. I had friends in high school and whatnot who were not LDS, which was unusual in my area. Honestly, we had a family of kids, and I'm ashamed of this, embarrassed by it, not ashamed, not my fault. We had a family of kids up the street, kind of kitty corner from us, the Welches, and the Welches had somewhere between 8 and 11 kids. They were Catholic, big family. I didn't know any of those children because we weren't allowed to play with them. I
Hmm.
can't imagine what it would have been like to have been one of the kids in that family, growing up in a community where you're surrounded with other kids who kind of pretend you're not there.
So they're kind of ostracized. Is
Just
that why they
ignore.
needed to have so many kids so that they could keep
Yeah.
each other company?
I think it's because they were Catholic. The only people who are as good at populating the earth as the
Mm,
Mormons are probably the Catholics. The whole birth
right.
control thing isn't a big hit with either one of those cultures.
Right.
So, you know, but yeah,
Talk
yeah,
about technology and its
yeah,
impact,
yeah,
birth
yeah,
control.
yeah. Nobody was mean to them. My parents never said be mean to them. We were never mean to them. We just knew we couldn't bring them over to the house.
Right.
So since you couldn't bring them around, your friends were the kids that you knew from church, so
Hmm.
you just didn't. Yeah. But that bothered me as a kid. I was aware of it
Hmm.
and it seemed odd to me. I could never see anybody as being the other. And I don't know why that is. I don't know why I've never been able to see my fellow human beings as the other,
Maybe
regardless of what
because
they
you
look.
occupied so many of their positions.
Perhaps, but to my knowledge, at least not this time around, I've never been a woman. But I never believed that women were inherently any different than men. Certainly not in any way that mattered. But see, once again, my mother was a very powerful professional woman.
Mm.
She was extremely successful. And if anybody domineered or controlled our household, it was mom. So I would have never have seen my mother as being servile or subservient in any way.
I see.
That was my female role model, right?
Right.
So I would have never have been exposed to that either. My favorite person in my whole life was my grandmother, who, in my opinion, is a saint, was a saint, still is somewhere. And I adored her. If anything, I had my most difficult relationships with men and
Mm.
boys. That whole testosterone thing is pretty toxic.
Mhm.
Um, you know, but still, yeah, I never have been able to see people as being really different from me. When I got into deeper into Eastern spirituality, everything, this whole idea that, the divine is everybody you meet, it just seemed like common sense to me. Of course it is.
Mhm.
Of course it is. That's
Right.
what's between everybody. But so, yeah, technology, did it help with that? I mean, I taught remotely for 2 years almost that I couldn't have done without it. We're Zooming now. I've met you in person, but by now I think we may have spent more time through a camera
Right.
than we have face to face. Um, and and this idea of what it records, right? I always tell people, be very careful what you say because words are like little birds, man. Once you say them, they fly away. You don't have any control over where they land. Well,
Mhm.
that's always been true because people will pass it along, tell on you. But
Mm.
today, it's documented. So even though nothing I have said here today is meant to offend or irritate or bother anybody, it will. Just because you can't say anything that won't bother somebody.
Right.
Um, and it's going to be permanent, as long as your venture survives, it will be around, right? So this
Yeah.
idea that our conversations, our ideas, freezing who we are in this moment of time.
Mhm. Yeah, I
Um,
actually want to open this up so that people can come back. So we are, in fact, freeze framing, this moment, but maybe in a year or two, you'll want to do another interview and figure out where you are then, and maybe it'll be different.
yeah, definitely so. I always say that how somebody looks, how good somebody looks, Gayatri, depends entirely on when you're looking at them.
Yeah.
When I was a professional illustrator, I was working for Business Week, I was working for Forbes, I was making good money. I had a rent controlled apartment on 55th between 5th and 6th Avenue, right below the
Mm.
park.
Mhm.
Parquet floors, beautiful place, huge doorman building. And I would go every day when the weather was nice, and I would sit in Central Park with my sketchbook and I would do my thumbnails for my clients, right? Anybody, and I was married to a beautiful woman. Oh my God. My wife at the time was just exquisitely beautiful. And we were best friends. We never fought. We never disagreed. It was just beautiful. Anybody looking at me in that moment in time would have thought I had the world, under my thumb. I was good. That
Mhm.
guy's got it together. Uh, 2 years later, she left. In the process of dealing with that, we went to marriage counseling for over a year, both of us, separate appointments. That cost a flippin' fortune, which broke me financially. I went into severe depression, so I quit working like I should work. And what I should have done is just put myself in a cabinet and lock the door, because I needed to do work anyway, right? But my heart wasn't in the work I was doing anymore. So
Mm.
instead of doing illustration, artwork for heaven's sakes, to the best it could be, I gave myself a timer. If you're paying me $500, that's a 5-hour job. And I would sit down, I'd hit a stopwatch, and I'd go.
Mm.
You can't treat artwork like that,
Mm-mm.
right? And I would turn that in, and one by one, I lost clients I'd had for years.
Oh
For
no.
years. So by the time the dust settled, the
Mhm.
only client I had left was Bernadette Fang, who was my friend and also an art director. So she kept giving me work occasionally because we were buddies, but nobody
Right.
else. My career was over. So
That's so
my closest
interesting.
friend and my whole life gone. My career, this whole idea of who I am as a successful guy, published illustrator, big magazines, gone. I
Yeah.
have I have an apartment I can't afford. It's rent stabilized and I still can't afford it. I never did lose that. I got clever. I found ways to stay there, but that was almost gone. If you'd have been looking at me on the wrong weekend during that period of time,
Mm-hmm.
you'd have thought, wow, that guy is a complete mess. They were the same man, the exact same man. Only thing that changed is when you were looking.
But it's so interesting what you said about setting a stopwatch to do art and art as commodity, which just was not as saleable because it's not really art.
That's right.
You know?
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it hurt to work. When you're in
Yeah,
deep
no.
depression, it hurts to work. The only thing you want to do in deep depression is sleep. So, yeah, work isn't sleep. So that was tough. I've had a few really dark periods in my life. I would say talking about changes in life, that was one of the times where my life started over. I changed careers. That's when I turned around and went into a whole new field. It wasn't just the computer that made me extinct. It was a horrible divorce that also helped make me extinct. I was already losing clients.
Mm-hmm.
This finished them off. I started a whole new career because of it, right? And then eventually I got remarried, and that's how I have this child that I have now. Built a whole different life. And if you look at me now, I look okay,
Yeah.
right? Right?
Yeah.
But hey, stay tuned,
Right.
you know?
Amazing. Thank you so much. What a wild ride.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah, your life
I
has been
Yeah, well, I'm
up
sure
till
yours has this
now,
too.
up
Yeah,
till now.
yeah,
But there's much, much more to come. But you're so much better equipped to take it in now,
yeah, yeah.
you know?
Yeah, I always thought that I was meant for a small life. My siblings joke that of all the people, I'm mama's boy, of all the people who were supposed to stay in Bountiful, Utah and work at the mall, that was me. And I ended up living this life. And they're like, but that must have been wrong because everything happens for a reason, right? So
Yep.
the little quiet kid who looked like he was supposed to lead a quiet life had a really big life.
And I wonder if part of that had to do with the fact that you encountered situations both in your youth and then later on that were so impactful, negatively or positively, but they were so impactful, you had to figure out how to become bigger than the situation you were in.
Exactly. One of the big motivators for me choosing to come back east was to prove to myself and everybody else that the kid who couldn't cut it in England could cut it in New York.